So now that we've established which one's the best, let's talk about some of our major things. Now, what I've left this screen on here for is if you do have a graphing calculator, these are the steps that you would follow. So I wanted to leave it in, I wanted to include this here. You would need to type your data into an L1 column. Um, you would go to stat edit and then put that into that very first list. And then you would go stat and press calc, and we'd go to one variable statistics. When we do that, it gives us these components over here in this table. So I want to tell you what each of these represent. This symbol, often called X bar, this symbol stands for the mean of my data. That's the average, the mean of my data. This symbol is a Greek letter and it stands for the standard deviation. I'm just going to put STD dev. Okay, standard deviation. So we've just talked about what that means. But the standard deviation is important to understand how we measure our center. Now, these last five here are very important because these five values right here are all going to help us create what's called a box and whisker plot, all right? A box and whisker graph. So we're going to be talking about that in a little bit, but it's important to note from the very beginning that these are the five values that are going to create that. And I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but just in case, a min x is obviously your minimum. Q1, this one's a little bit different. This is what's called the first quartile. First quartile. A quartile is a halfway point through the halfway. So if you think about the median, right, which is what MED is right here, that's our median. If you think about the median being halfway through the data, the first quartile, Q1, is halfway through that halfway. So the first quartile is halfway. Then Q3 would be halfway through the second half of the data. That's our third quartile. So third quartile. And then lastly, again, your maximum is obviously your biggest number. That's the maximum value. So these seven values are really important that we're able to find them. And what we're going to practice now is we're going to practice using Desmos to actually find these values. So on the Desmos screen, this is what you're going to do. You are going to type your data into Desmos, and I'm going to model this for you. But we're going to type our data into Desmos using this format. You're going to start by typing the letter A. We'll use a different color there. You start by typing the letter A, and then once you've typed the letter A, you're going to use a square bracket. It is so important that you are using a square bracket. So these brackets here are square brackets. This is how we tell Desmos that we're typing in data. So our data has to be inside a square bracket. It's on your keyboard. It's right next to the P value. If you look at P on the keyboard, it's right next to P. And then once you've typed your square bracket, you obviously type in your numbers and you separate those with commas. And then once the numbers and the commas are in, we then can actually do all of our stats. So this screen right here in the very middle is all of the stats things that are available to us, but I've X'd out all the ones we're not going to use. The ones that we are going to use are obviously mean and median. So you can see those right here, mean and median, your minimum, your maximum. Quartile is a bit unique. I'm going to teach you how to use that one. And then last but not least, I want you to notice that there is a standard dev, which is right here. We're not going to use stdev. We're going to use stdevp. And if you get to statistics later in life, then you'll understand the difference between those. But stdevp stands for population. We're going to include the entire population when we find our standard deviation. So really important that we feel comfortable using Desmos because it is very, very helpful. It gives us basically all of the answers, but we have to know how to use it. So like I said, when you're doing quartiles, you'll see me do this in a second, but this is how we actually find our information, our quartile. We type the word quartile, A, and then to find the first quartile, you have to type that number 1. To find the third quartile, you have to type the number 3. So let's jump into a practice problem.